Hey guys, it's Yorkie here and welcome to my very first race in iRacing. It's a game that I haven't actually played up until this point. I was given a free code by a friend, so I thought I'd give it a try. I had been meaning to, I just never kind of really got round to it. And yeah, I've been enjoying it an awful lot so far. It's quite a different challenge to the likes of Assetto Corsa and Project Cars, in the sense that it's heavily focused on clean racing. You get penalised quite heavily if you make contact. You also get penalised if you spin or come off the road. So there's the green light and getting a fairly decent launch off the line. Looks like our reaction times are slightly better than the guys around us. Did have a tiny bit of wheel spin, but nothing too major. And it looks like we're slipping up the inside from P7 up into P6 into turn 1. And it looks like the two guys in front of us are going to make contact. Just about managing to slip up the inside without getting tagged there. And the guy obviously trying to correct himself, but overcorrected and spun him off in the opposite direction. And that's gone and promoted me up into P3, and that was a very tense first corner. Just kind of hold your breath, think thin, and just hold it on the inside line and just pray and hope that there wasn't any contact, which there wasn't. So you can now breathe a little bit and try and calm the nerves, try and bring that heart rate back down and kind of settle into this race. I had done about 4 hours of practice prior to this, not just in this car but also in a couple of other cars as well, also on different tracks, and I did about an hour and a half worth of practice on this track alone in this car prior to getting into this race. It was highly recommended by a number of tips and tricks videos and other YouTubers. Basically just practice because there is so much focus on trying to avoid making contact and trying to be as clean as possible. And obviously the earlier you can get that in your mindset and into your basically your racing technique in iRacing, the better. Obviously I try and be as fair as possible anyway in the other games, but it's just the fact that you do get penalised if you with penalty points, and your safety rating drops if you do make contact. It's just, you think a lot more, you be a fair bit more cautious, and obviously you kind of plan and strategize your overtaking maneuvers a fair bit more rather than kind of thinking on the fly and reacting. Obviously you do have to in some places and some situations, and obviously and other times contact is unavoidable, but you know, there is always a little bit of something that you can do to avoid it. So not pushing too hard at the moment, obviously just trying to settle into the race, obviously trying to keep within my own and the car's limits, and also obviously within the two white lines of the track as well. Just making sure I'm being nice and smooth. The two guys up ahead kind of jostling for position a little bit. That's allowed me to close the gap running with the free end. It looks like second position has gone and lost the rear end and has spun off the field onto the grass on the inside there. So that's gone and gifted me P2, and that was another slightly heart-stopping moment, having to get on the brakes a little bit earlier than I would have liked to have backed out the throttle, hesitated on it ever so slightly through the exit, just to make sure that obviously I don't lose my own car being distracted by the guys being off in front of me. And now it's about kind of again settling those nerves a little bit, trying to manage the pressure that's on the shoulders, especially now being in P2 and being this close to P1. Obviously it looks like a little bit faster in a couple of corners, managing to keep pace with him and closing the gap in a couple of places, but we've got a long way to go. We've only just started lap 4, it's 20 laps, each lap is about a minute or so, just over, and it looks like we're closing quite heavily on him on the first two turns there, keeping a much tighter line than he was, and looking really quite close at the rear end. Obviously I don't want to knock him up the rear and make any contact, but it looks like I'm getting a much better line, hooking up the apex, much more flowing and open than he was, not scrubbing the tyres ever so much, and I'm carrying a fair bit more speed. And I've got the inside line for this corner, but I'm going to back out of it, as I know that the racing line just would have swept across my front there. It's kind of what he did, so obviously still plenty of time in the race to make the move, and knowing that I am quicker than him, I was happy to concede basically the corner for a bit and just settle back in behind him again. He's going to build a little bit of a gap through that, because obviously he took a much more flowing line than I did and carried a bit more of the speed and momentum. but even still, I know I am quicker in a number of places, especially through here in turns 1 and also 2. It looked like you've gone very, very wide, and as you can see, the gap closing quite heavily just there. And this guy is also actually a class above me. I'm obviously, this being my first race, I'm a rookie, so my car is marked with a red band across the back, just above the rear bumper. You can see his car is marked with an orange band. That means he's up in Class D, which is a class up above me, and each and every different class has its own colour banding. So since then, since this race, I have moved up into Class D myself. Looks like we've had actually a much better run than him, getting fairly close coming into the final turn. But he's just able to hook it up a little bit better than I was. A little bit of understeer for myself upon initial turning, which is going to allow him to build that gap back out a bit. But yeah, obviously since doing this race, which was just over a week ago now to the time of recording this video, it's, yeah, obviously my knowledge of the car and also my handling and my driving has improved a fair bit since then, and also this track as well takes slightly different lines, don't brake in a couple of places, and kind of able to carry slightly better speed and obviously get better lap times out of it. So obviously my driving performance in this game is constantly improving. As we ride the curb ever so slightly and get very loose coming over the crest of that hill, which does tend to happen if you're still turning. But obviously I'm trying to keep the car nice and smooth, nice and stable, trying not to push too hard as we come into the final corner. It looks like we've had a fairly decent run. Obviously these cars aren't amazingly fast, as you can see, about hitting 110 miles per hour now, so there isn't too much of a slipstream. You're kind of gaining on him a little bit, but the straight here isn't quite long enough as we come into turns 1 and 2. He's taking a fair bit of a tighter line this time, but not hooking up the inside quite as well as I did, which is allowing me to close up again onto the rear of his car and getting fairly close. Obviously I want to avoid making contact with the rear of his car, so just backing out the throttle ever so very slightly, moving again to the inside into this turn, but it doesn't quite look like we've got the speed to get up alongside him too fast, so giving him the corner again, but he didn't take that amazingly quick. He wasn't quite as fast as he was last time. He kind of sat on the brakes a little bit more. Guessing he didn't quite feel that the car was quite 100% there underneath him, which has allowed me to maintain this gap and keep fairly close. We've got a fair gap to third position behind us. It's about 9.4 seconds behind, which is good, so we can afford to drop off every now and then a little bit, but not too much, because obviously I don't want to lose sight of P1. I want to keep this pressure on him and keep him looking in the rear view mirror and fill his mirrors with my car. So we're coming now into turn 3, braking ever so very slightly and just turning, and it's like his car's gone and lost the rear end, and he's just slid off to the left hand side of the track there, same as it did with P2 a couple of laps ago, and that's gone and gifted me first position. And the gap is, as you can see down at the bottom right there, roughly about 7 seconds now. So obviously he's lost all speed and momentum, so I'm just going to constantly keep pulling away ever so slightly as I'm carrying that speed, and that has given me a rather nice buffer. So now it's definitely time to settle down a little bit more than previously, and obviously just continue on through the race. And from here on out, it basically was just me driving in first position, apart from lapping 1 or 2 guys such as this guy here who's just pulled out of the pits, and obviously he's there kind of in the way, but he does move quite nicely out the way just there, as you can see, allowing me to slip through. But other than that, it was just a case of constantly managing the gap to the guy behind, and yeah, just constantly building it. So I'm going to finish it there because I don't want to bore you guys. As you can see there, those are the lap times that I was setting throughout the entire race. So fairly consistent, not too much in it, dipping into the 102s every now and then, but mostly in the 101s. And then those there are the final result, just to prove that I did finish the race in first. The guy in second was 11.259 seconds behind. So very happy with that first race, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that race too. I'd like to provide more iRacing footage if you guys are up for it. So please give the video a rating. If you have any comments or questions, or you definitely do want to see more footage, let me know in the comments below. And thanks very much for watching, guys. I shall hopefully see you soon. Take care.